One afternoon, Madame Angel, Rebecca's mother, came to visit her at their home. As she stepped inside, Jason greeted her with a playful tone. "Welcome. Have you come to spoil your grandchildren today?" he teased. Madame Angel laughed heartily, nodding in agreement. "Yes, oh. I've come to play with my grandbabies and spoil my daughter, a little too," she replied warmly. Jason led Madame Angel into the house, and together they headed toward the children's parlor, where Rebecca was playing with Clara, now age 10, and Mercy, who had just turned 6. The room was filled with laughter as the girls happily played with their mother. As soon as Madame Angel and Jason stepped into the room, Rebecca looked up, her face lighting up. "Mom, welcome," she greeted, getting up to embrace her mother. Grandma, Clara, and Mercy squealed excitedly as they rushed over. Madame Angel bent down to meet them at their level, a bright smile on her face as she pulled out a pack of lollipop from her purse. "Look what I brought for my favorite girls," she said, her voice full of affection. Mercy gasped in delight, her eyes widening as she peeked into the bag. "Lollipops," she exclaimed in excitement. Clara's eyes sparkled as she looked up at her grandmother. "Thank you, Grandma," she said sweetly, giving her a tight hug. The next 2 hours were filled with fun as Mrs. Angel played with Clara and Mercy, telling them stories as they enjoyed the treats she had brought. After some time, Mrs. Angel turned to Rebecca with a serious look. "Rebecca, come with me. I need to talk to you in private." Rebecca, curious but unconcerned, smiled and followed her mother to the guest room. Rebecca noticed the change in her mother's expression. "What's going on, Mom? Why did you call me here? Did I do something wrong?" she asked, half joking, trying to ease the tension. Madame Angel's face, however, remained serious. "Yes, you did, Rebecca. You've committed an offense, and that's why I needed to talk to you," she said, her voice sharp with frustration. Rebecca blinked, taken aback by her mother's stern tone. "Mom, what do you mean? I haven't done anything wrong." Madame Angel sighed heavily, shaking her head in disappointment. "Rebecca, you've made a huge mistake. And it's not even about me. It's about Mercy, your daughter." Rebecca's confusion grew. "Mercy? What about her?" Madame Angel cut her off. "You're selling off your daughter's space in this house to Jason's child, Clara." Rebecca stared at her mother in shock, her heart pounding. "Mom, what are you talking about? Clara is part of this family too. She's Jason's daughter, and I love her like my own," she explained, trying to keep her voice calm. "Rebecca, you live in this mansion, a house owned by a very wealthy man, your husband. If you continue to treat his daughter well, he would soon send you out and give everything to her daughter." Rebecca's mouth went dry. "Clara is my stepdaughter, Mom. I made a promise to Jason to take care of her. Moreover, her late mother was the owner of my husband's wealth." Mrs. Angel cut her off again, her voice sharp. "You don't get it, Rebecca. The moment you became pregnant with Jason's child, your role in this family changed. You're not just his wife anymore, you're the madam of this house, and whatever you say stands." Rebecca was speechless, her mind spinning as she tried to process her mother's words. She had always seen Clara as part of the family, and Jason had never treated her, or Mercy, any differently. "Mom, I can't do that. Clara is a part of our family. I love her, and so does Jason. I can't just push her aside for Mercy's sake," Rebecca said quietly, her voice shaking slightly. Madame Angel shook her head, her expression hardening. "You're too soft, Rebecca. Clara is not your daughter, and no matter how much you love her, that won't change. If you don't make sure Mercy has the place she deserves, you'll regret it." After a long pause, Rebecca finally nodded, though her heart remained conflicted. "Okay, Mom, I'll think about what you've said," she replied softly, her mind still racing. Madame Angel stood up, her face softening slightly. You better think fast, Rebecca. Don't let another woman's child take what belongs to your daughter. 2 days after, Madame Angel went back to our house. After Madame Angel left, Rebecca couldn't shake the heavy weight of the discussion off her chest. Then she determined to address the matter. She called Jason to their bedroom. When Jason entered, he sat down. He chuckled nervously and said, "It seems like everyone is being called into rooms for serious talks lately. I hope everything is all right." Rebecca, her face stern, took a deep breath. "Everything is all right, Jason," she said, though her tone betrayed otherwise. "But there are some new developments I need to inform you about." Jason raised an eyebrow, unsure of what to expect. Rebecca continued, her voice colder now. "From today, Clara will stop playing with my daughter, Mercy. I had a terrible dream about her. She was the one responsible for her mother's death, and I don't want to be a victim. I don't want her bringing harm to my child." Jason blinked, stunned. "What, Rebecca, what are you saying?" he asked, confusion creeping into his voice. But Rebecca wasn't finished. She pressed on. "Henceforth Mercy is my priority, and everything in this house will be done to ensure her comfort and future. Clara comes second, or not at all." Jason stood up abruptly, anger and disbelief swirling inside him. "Rebecca, this is madness. How can you even say something like that? This is my house, and Clara is my daughter. You don't get to just decide to treat her this way." Rebecca laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. "Your house? Jason, you still don't understand, do you? The moment I married you, this house became mine, so don't dare tell me how I run the affairs of my house. She has seen you as a mother figure. Please don't let her down. Please, not even now that she had gotten over her mom's loss." Jason's hands shook. He struggled to contain his anger. "Rebecca, Clara is innocent. She's just a child. She's done nothing to deserve this. I can't believe you're saying these things. What happened to the woman I married?" Rebecca shook her head. "That woman is gone, Jason." With that, Rebecca turned and walked out of the room, leaving Jason standing there. Jason sat back down heavily, his mind reeling from the confrontation. He stared blankly at the wall, his thoughts a chaotic mess. "Oh God, what can I do now?" he muttered to himself, his heart heavy with regret. As soon as Rebecca left Jason, her mind was made up. She stormed into the children's room, where Clara and Mercy were playing. Her expression was cold, her demeanor intimidating. "Clara," Rebecca began with an icy tone, "from today, you are no longer allowed to sleep in this room. You'll be sleeping in the kitchen from now on." Clara blinked, confused, trying to process what she was hearing. "The kitchen," she whispered, her small voice trembling. "Yes, the kitchen," Rebecca snapped. "And to make sure you aren't crawling with cockroaches, I'll be generous enough to spread some blankets on the floor for you. Now, get out of this room before I open my eyes." Terrified, Clara burst into tears and ran out of the room, her little feet carrying her as fast as they could. The sound of her sobs echoed down the hallway as she disappeared. Once Clara was gone, Mercy, who had been watching the whole scene unfold, looked at her mother with confusion. "Mom," she said quietly, "why are you being so mean to Clara? She's my sister. She didn't do anything wrong. Her mom didn't die because of her. It was an accident, remember? She had a car crash." "Mercy, my darling," Rebecca began, her voice taking on a more soothing tone, "you need to understand something very important." Mercy looked up at her mother, waiting for an explanation. "You know your father, Jason, is a very wealthy man, right?" Rebecca asked. Mercy nodded. "Well, all of his wealth, everything he owns, should go to you. You are his daughter, and I am your mother." But if we allow Clara to stay here and live like she's part of this family, she could take away everything that should be yours, Rebecca said, her eyes narrowing with intensity. But Clara's my sister, Mercy protested, her brow furrowing. I don't want her to suffer. Rebecca's tone becoming more forceful. If you let Clara stay here and grow up with the same privileges as you, she could end up taking everything your father has worked for. You don't want to be left with nothing, do you? She looked up at her mother, a small smile creeping onto her face as she nodded. No, Mom, I don't want that. I understand now. Rebecca smiled, satisfied that she had gotten through to her daughter. Good girl, she said, patting Mercy's head. Together, we will make sure Clara doesn't take what's rightfully yours. Just trust me, okay? Mercy nodded again, her smile growing wider. Okay, Mom, I trust you. As Rebecca left the room, her mind was already working on the next steps of her plan. Clara's days in the house were numbered, and Rebecca was determined to secure her daughter's future at any cost. As Clara left children's room, tears streaming down her face, she ran to her father's room, her small body trembling with sadness and confusion. When she opened the door, she saw Jason sitting on the bed, his eyes distant, lost in deep thought. Hearing Clara's soft sobs, he snapped back to the present. My daughter, what's wrong? Jason asked, trying to sound calm, though concern was evident in his voice. He reached out for her as she approached, wiping away her tears. Jason became more worried when Clara refused to talk. Clara, please talk to me, he pleaded. Dad, Clara began, her voice shaking. Mom called me a bad luck girl. She said I can't play with Mercy anymore. She said I have to sleep in the kitchen from now on. The words tumbled out between sobs, her innocent heart breaking under the weight of Rebecca's cruelty. Jason's heart sank. He knew Rebecca had changed since her mom visited, but he didn't expect her to be this harsh towards Clara. Struggling to stay composed, he gently placed his hands on Clara's small shoulders and spoke in a soothing tone. Honey, Rebecca is going through a difficult time, he began, trying to find the right words. Sometimes, when people are upset or stressed, they say things they don't really mean. She didn't mean what she said about you being bad luck. She loves you, Clara. She's just going through a rough phase right now. Clara looked up at him, her tears slowly subsiding. But, Dad, she said I can't play with Mercy anymore. Jason sighed, feeling a surge of guilt. Rebecca still cares for you, sweetheart. Clara sniffled, uncertain, but willing to trust her father's comforting words. Okay, Daddy, she whispered. Jason smiled softly. Why don't you sleep here with me tonight? You can share my bed, and we'll watch over each other, okay? Clara nodded, her small voice gaining a bit of strength. Okay, Dad. That night, Jason held Clara close as she drifted off to sleep. His heart ached as he watched his daughter, knowing he was failing her by not standing up to Rebecca sooner. But he promised himself that things would change. However, as days turned into weeks, Clara began to realize that Rebecca wasn't just having a bad day or going through a phase. Rebecca had meant every word she said. She continued to distance herself from Clara, and soon, the divide between Clara and Mercy grew even wider. Rebecca instructed the chef there to cook for Clara again, and Clara was always watching from the doorway as Rebecca and Mercy shared warm meals together, while she was left to often eat cold leftovers or whatever the chef would quietly pass her. The divide in the household became more pronounced with each passing day. Rebecca's attitude toward Clara grew colder, and the once warm and inviting home had turned into a place where Clara felt unwelcome. Jason noticed the changes, too, but he felt trapped. He had hoped Rebecca would soften, and that things would get better with time, but the opposite was happening. Every time he tried to confront Rebecca about her behavior, she would dismiss him or twist the conversation to make him feel guilty, accusing him of loving Clara more than Mercy. That weekend, Rebecca decided to take Mercy out for lollipops, a little treat they had planned together. As she was about to head out the door, Clara overheard and hurried to get dressed. She rushed outside, just as Rebecca was opening the car door for Mercy. "Mom, please, can I come too? I want lollipops as well," Clara asked, her voice soft and hopeful. For a brief moment, Rebecca hesitated. The plea in Clara's eyes tugged at her heart, and she almost smiled, ready to agree. But before she could say anything, Mercy, who had already settled into the car, jumped out and ran toward them. "Bad luck, girl. Don't you dare come near my mother," Mercy shouted, shoving Clara hard. The force of the push startled Clara, and in a moment of frustration, she pushed Mercy back. The playful outing was quickly turning into a chaotic scene. A scuffle broke out between the two girls, with both of them shoving each other back and forth. The tension escalated, and suddenly, Mercy slapped Clara across the face. Clara stood there, stunned, her hand flying to her cheek in shock. She had never expected her younger sister to hit her. Her eyes filled with tears, not just from the sting of the slap, but from the betrayal. At that very moment, Jason, who had been watching from the house, burst through the front door. His face was flushed with anger, and without thinking, he raised his hand, ready to discipline Mercy. "How dare you slap your elder sister?" Jason shouted, his voice booming with fury. "What kind of girl are you turning into, Mercy?" The tension in the air was thick, and just as Jason's hand was about to come down, Rebecca rushed forward, grabbing his arm mid-air. Her eyes were blazing with anger, and her grip was tight. "Jason, don't you ever raise your hand to my daughter," Rebecca warned, her voice low and dangerous. "If you do, you'll regret it for the rest of your life." Clara, still holding her cheek, looked between her father and Rebecca, confused and heartbroken. She didn't understand why her family was falling apart like this. Jason turned to Clara, who was now silently crying. He pulled her into his arms, holding her close as he tried to calm her down. "I'll bring you all the lollipops you want. We'll have our own special day together, just you and me." Clara sniffled, wiping her tears away, and nodded, comforted by her father's promise. "Okay, Daddy," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Rebecca stood back, her arms crossed, watching the scene unfold. She didn't say anything, but her stance made it clear that this confrontation was far from over. Mercy, meanwhile, looked remorseful for a brief moment, but quickly retreated to Rebecca's side, holding her mother's hand protectively. As Jason kissed Clara on the forehead, he stood up and gave Rebecca a hard look. "We'll talk about this when I get back," he said firmly before turning and walking toward his car. Rebecca didn't respond. She simply watched him go, her expression unreadable. As the car pulled away, Clara stood alone, her heart heavy. Though Jason had tried to console her, deep down, she knew that something was broken in their family, and she wasn't sure if it could ever be fixed. 4 years later, as Jason was driving home after a long day at work, tragedy struck. A massive trailer lost control and collided with his car, smashing into him with a force so great that the vehicle was nearly unrecognizable. Jason was critically injured and immediately rushed to the hospital, his condition hanging by a thread. Hours later, Rebecca received the devastating news. Her heart sank as she rushed to the hospital, her mind spinning with worrying and fear. When she arrived, she was immediately directed to the doctor's office. "Doctor, what's the condition of my husband?" Rebecca asked, her voice trembling, barely holding herself together. Dr. Micah sighed and gave her a grave look. Mrs. Rebecca, your husband was severely injured in the accident. His spinal cord was badly damaged, and I'm afraid he may never walk again. The words hit Rebecca like a brick wall, her breath caught in her throat, and she broke down into tears, the weight of the news too much to bear. Please, I need to see him, she sobbed, clutching the doctor's hand in desperation. Dr. Micah nodded and led her to Jason's room. When she entered, her heart broke at the sight of her husband. Jason lay motionless on the bed, his face pale, his body wrapped in bandages. She sat beside him, tears streaming down her face as she whispered to him, "I'm here, Jason, I'm here." Soon after, Rebecca's mother, Madame Angel, arrived at the hospital, her face stern but full of concern. The next day, Madame Angel announced to the doctors, "Please discharge Jason to me. We're taking him to a place I know. They have the best care there. He'll recover faster." Rebecca, still in shock and overwhelmed, agreed. She didn't have the emotional or physical strength to argue. And the promise of expert care for Jason sounded like the best option. Rebecca and Madame Angel took Jason to a remote care center, a place isolated from friends, family, and the rest of the world. Jason, still heavily medicated and unable to comprehend his surroundings, was left there under the guise of receiving specialized treatment. But the next morning, Rebecca and Madame Angel returned home with a different story. They spread the devastating news. Jason had tragically passed away due to complications from his injuries. With a cold detachment, they told everyone that he hadn't made it through the night. Morning followed. Clara couldn't stand the reality of living without her father, while Mercy's tears flowed uncontrollably. The very next day, Rebecca dressed and walked confidently into Jason's company. With her head held high, she announced herself as the new chairperson of her husband's business. The employees were shocked by the suddenness of the announcement, as they had only just learned of Jason's passing, but they did not dare question her authority. "I am now in charge," Rebecca declared as she addressed the board of directors. "As Jason's wife, I will take his place as head of this company. We will continue forward, but under new leadership." Behind the scenes, Rebecca had already forged documents and manipulated those around her to secure control of Jason's assets and wealth. Once Rebecca fully took over Jadra International as the CEO, she wasted no time in assuming complete control over both the company and her personal life. With newfound power and wealth, her ambition seemed boundless. But there was one lingering issue that still irked her: Clara, Jason's daughter from his first marriage. Rebecca had been planning to throw Clara out of the house for a long time, convinced that the girl was nothing but an obstacle to her and Mercy's future inheritance. As she sat in her luxurious office one afternoon, reviewing company documents, she decided it was time to act. Clara had no place in her new world of control and success. That evening, Rebecca returned home with a plan to inform Clara that she would no longer be welcome in the mansion. However, before she could say anything, Madame Angel, who had been living with them ever since Jason's accident, approached her with a different idea. "Rebecca, I know you're eager to get rid of that girl," Madame Angel said, her eyes glinting with a cunning expression. "But sending her away just like that would raise too many eyebrows. People will talk, and the last thing we need is unnecessary attention right now." Rebecca frowned, considering her mother's words. "So what do you suggest, Mom?" "We can't just let her live here freely. She's a constant reminder of Jason, and I won't let her share the same roof as us much longer." Madame Angel smiled slyly, placing a hand on her daughter's shoulder. "Use her, Rebecca. Instead of throwing her out, we can make her useful. Keep her here, but not as part of the family." Rebecca's eyes gleamed with intrigue as the idea took root. The notion of reducing Clara to a mere servant gladdened her heart. "That's brilliant, Mom," Rebecca said, a slow smile spreading across her face. "If we make her the help, she'll be too busy to cause any trouble. And Mercy will have no competition for Jason's wealth." That same night, Rebecca summoned Clara to the living room, where she and Madame Angel were. Clara, now 14, had grown into a quiet and thoughtful girl, but the years of subtle mistreatment had worn her down. She walked in cautiously, sensing something ominous in the air. "Clara," Rebecca began, her voice cold and authoritative, "from this day forward, things will change. You're no longer part of this family. I am sending 2 of our house workers away. That is the gardener and the cleaner. Henceforth you take over their responsibilities." Clara stood frozen, her heart pounding. "But why, Mom? What did I do wrong?" she asked, her voice trembling. "You did nothing wrong, dear," Madame Angel said with a mockingly sweet tone. "But in this world, you have to know your place. Your place is not with us, but serving us. It's for the best." Clara's eyes welled up with tears, but she knew protesting would be futile. She had no one to turn to. "Yes, ma'am," Clara whispered, her voice barely audible. "I will do it." "Good," Rebecca said. Satisfied, "You can start by cleaning Mercy's room afterward." As the days turned into weeks, Clara worked tirelessly in the house, her once bright spirit dimming with every chore. Rebecca and Madame Angel revelled in their success, knowing they had finally put Clara in her place. As the years went by, both Clara and Mercy blossomed into young women. To everyone's surprise, Clara grew into an even more striking beauty than Mercy. Her graceful demeanor, along with her natural beauty, caught the attention of anyone who saw her. This stark contrast left Mercy seething with envy. One afternoon, while lounging in the living room, Mercy spotted Clara passing by, quietly carrying out her chores as usual. A twisted idea crossed her mind. "Clara," she called, her voice sharp and demanding. Clara quickly approached, wiping her hands on her apron. "Yes, Mercy." Mercy leaned back in her chair, a smirk playing on her lips. "Go fetch me a glass of water, and be quick about it." Without hesitation, Clara nodded and made her way to the kitchen. She filled a glass with water, careful not to spill a drop, and hurried back to where Mercy sat. As she reached Mercy, holding the glass out for her, something unexpected happened. In a flash, Mercy stuck out her foot and tripped Clara, causing her to stumble forward. The glass slipped from Clara's hands, shattering on the floor as water splashed across the room. Clara gasped, horrified by the accident. Before she could even apologize, Mercy's hand flew across Clara's face, delivering a sharp slap that echoed through the room. Clara staggered back, her cheek stinging with pain. "How dare you?" Mercy hissed, her face twisted with malice. "Do you think just because your father left money behind, you can go around wasting things? Do you think this house is made of gold?" Her voice dripped with contempt. Clara's eyes welled up with tears, but she held her tongue, knowing any protest would only worsen the situation. Mercy stepped closer, her tone colder than ever. "Since you're so careless with my mother's money, I'm going to teach you a lesson. From now on, you'll only eat once a day. Let's see if going hungry helps you understand the value of what you waste." Without waiting for a response, Mercy turned away, satisfied with the pain she had inflicted. For her, it was just another victory, another way to assert her dominance over the stepsister she so deeply envied. As Clara quietly gathered the broken glass, her tears mingled with the water on the floor. She was used to the cruelty, but each moment like this chipped away at her spirit. That day, as Rebecca was driving home from work, she decided to stop at the market to pick up some fresh groceries. With the car packed full of items, she began the journey home. However, A few miles from the house, her car sputtered and came to an abrupt stop. Frustrated and confused, she stood beside her car, lost in thought. A man crossed the road toward her. He was tall, well-built, and casually dressed. His demeanor was calm and confident. As he approached, he gave a warm smile and introduced himself. "Hello, ma'am. I'm Harris," he said politely. "You seem to be in a bit of a predicament. Do you need any help?" Rebecca, initially cautious, quickly sized him up. "Yes, actually. My car broke down, and I've got all these groceries to carry. Could you help me lift the load?" Of course, Harris responded without hesitation. He began helping Rebecca unload the bags from the trunk. As they walked toward her home, they chatted briefly, and Harris mentioned how he had been struggling to find steady work. "It's been tough out here," he explained. "I've been looking for any kind of job for a while now, but nothing has come through. Please help. I can take any available job." Rebecca thought for a moment and said, "Why don't you come by tomorrow, so we can discuss it?" Harris smiled gratefully. "Thank you so much, ma'am. I'll be there first thing tomorrow." 2 days after, Harris started work as Rebecca's gardener. Within just a couple of days, he made a noticeable difference. Harris quickly became well liked by everyone for his good looks, friendly nature, and hard work. Mercy enjoyed watching him work, and she admired his beautiful smile. While Clara was always there to help him out whenever he's working. Harris was not only efficient at his job, but he had a way of bringing lightness to the atmosphere whenever he was around. Over time, Harris, who had become familiar with everyone in the house, began to take notice of the 2 young women, Clara and Mercy, who had distinctly different personalities. Clara was kind-hearted, humble, and beautiful, but treated like an outcast by Rebecca and Mercy. Mercy, on the other hand, had grown to be manipulative, spoiled, and constantly sought attention. Yet, despite Mercy's harsh personality, Harris found himself drawn to her. One day, after much contemplation, Harris finally summoned the courage to approach Mercy. He had developed a strong infatuation for her over time and decided to ask for her hand in marriage. After finishing his work in the garden, Harris approached Mercy in the hallway with a nervous smile. As soon as Mercy saw him coming, she smiled at him from afar and said, "Your smile is contagious." "Mercy, I've been thinking for a while, and I wanted to ask you something important." Mercy with a smile responded, "I am wealthy and very able to provide for you. Making a low life like you comfortable shouldn't be a problem to me. So what do you want?" Harris went on his knees and asked, "Would you consider marrying me?" Mercy looked at him in utter shock, and then, with a sneer, burst out laughing. "Are you out of your mind?" she spat. "You, a mere gardener, asking me, the daughter of Rebecca, for a marriage? Do you even know who you're talking to? How dare you?" Her voice was dripping with contempt. Hurt and humiliated, Harris stood frozen, unable to respond as Mercy continued to belittle him. She mocked his social standing and made it clear that he was not worthy of even looking at her, let alone proposing marriage. When she was done insulting him, she stormed off and immediately went to tell her mother what had just happened. "Mom," Mercy exclaimed, "you won't believe what just happened. That pathetic gardener, Harris, actually had the audacity to propose to me. Can you imagine?" Rebecca raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued. After hearing the whole story, she smirked. Instead of being angry, she saw an opportunity in Harris's proposal. "Oh, okay. I would handle him." The next day, Rebecca asked him to see her privately. She looked at him with a cunning smile. "Harris, I heard about your little proposition to my daughter," she began, pacing slowly in front of him. Harris braced himself for another wave of insults, but was surprised when Rebecca didn't scold him. Now, as you've come to understand, Mercy is a no-go area, she continued coldly. She's destined for far better things than marrying a mere gardener like you. But I do have another proposal for you. Harris looked at her with a mixture of confusion and curiosity. Please, Ma, I'm in love with Mercy. Shut up and listen to me. Rebecca continued. There's someone else in this house that you could marry. Clara, she's like you, a servant in this house. A low life, just like you. I can actually give her to you free of charge. I can arrange for you to marry her, and it will solve both of our problems. You get a wife, and I get her out of this house. Harris hesitated for a moment. All right, Harris agreed. If Clara is willing, then I will marry her. Rebecca grinned, pleased with the outcome. Clara had no choice. I'm the one in charge of her life. Just get yourself a place where both of you can live. I want her out of this house in less than 48 hours. Harris nodded and said, where I am staying looks so unkempt. I am not sure if she would stay there with me. He then smiled and appreciated her for giving him a wife. I would move her to my place tomorrow. Harris took Clara to his humble home, a face me I face you apartment, in a crowded and run-down neighborhood, in the same city. We'll get married in a month, Harris said to Clara, but for now, I'll be staying elsewhere, and you can stay here alone. I'll come by to check on you regularly and make sure you're okay. Clara was at peace in her new house, despite the fact that it was nothing compared to the mansion where she had lived, but she had no choice but to adjust. As the wedding day approached, Harris, determined to make it a proper ceremony despite his modest means, he had begged Rebecca, Mercy and Angel to attend their wedding. Rebecca agreed, though it was clear she saw the wedding as nothing more than a formality to fully rid herself of Clara. The morning of the wedding arrived, and Clara was woken up early by the sound of knocking at the door. When she opened it, a team of makeup artists and stylists stood outside, sent by Harris to prepare her for the ceremony. Clara was puzzled. She had expected a simple, low-key affair and couldn't understand why Harris should go this far. The makeup artists got to work quickly, styling her hair into an elegant updo and applying layers of makeup that transformed her face. After they finished, they led her outside, where to our shock, a beautifully adorned luxury car was waiting for her, with 2 other security cars. Is this for me? Clara asked in disbelief. The driver nodded with a polite smile, and 2 security men helped her into the car. Clara couldn't believe what was happening. The rundown neighborhood she had been staying in disappeared from view as the car drove toward the heart of the city. The car pulled up in front of a massive, beautifully decorated event plaza. Clara was wide-eyed as Harris appeared at the entrance, looking sharp in a well-tailored suit. Security officers were stationed everywhere. Harris approached the car and, with a broad smile, opened the door for her. He offered his hand to help her out. And as Clara stepped onto the red carpet, leading into the grand hall, she was overwhelmed. Harris led her into the hall, which was filled with elegant decorations. As Clara stood at the altar with Harris, the ceremony was in full swing when she suddenly noticed Rebecca, Mercy and Grandma, Angel, walking into the hall. They were visibly stunned by the grandeur of the event, the elegant decor, the high-profile guests, and the sophisticated atmosphere that surrounded the wedding. Rebecca, with a look of disbelief, whispered urgently to someone nearby, "Who is this Harris, the groom? What's going on here?" After a few hurried inquiries, Rebecca received the shocking news. Harris was not just an ordinary person. The realization hit Rebecca, an angel like a bolt of lightning. This was no ordinary wedding, and Harris was not the simple man she had thought. I don't know why he needed to hide his identity. Mercy, who had been listening intently, turned to her mother with a look of fury. "This is supposed to be my wedding, not Clara's." She spat, her face twisted with jealousy. "I need a wedding gown, now. I must fight for what belongs to me." Without hesitation, Rebecca pulled out her phone and made a call. Within minutes, a lady arrived with a stunning wedding gown in hand, ready for Mercy to wear. Rebecca gestured for Mercy to step out and change quickly. A few minutes later, Mercy reappeared, now dressed in a lavish white gown. With her head held high, she strode confidently down the aisle, heading straight for the altar. Gasps of surprise echoed through the hall as guests watched Mercy's brazen interruption. The security guards at the event stepped forward, ready to block her path, but Harris raised his hand, signaling them to let her through. Rebecca, seated nearby, smiled smugly, confident that her daughter was about to take over the ceremony. Clara stood frozen in confusion, glancing between Harris and Mercy, unsure of what was happening. Mercy, however, was full of certainty as she marched up to Harris, her eyes glinting with triumph. She smiled as she walked towards the stage with the full assurance that she always got whatever she desired. Standing beside Harris at the altar, she declared boldly, "I have come to say yes to your proposal, my love. You were never meant to be with this lowlife." She pointed dismissively at Clara, her voice dripping with disdain. Clara's heart sank as she stared at her stepsister, but before she could react, Harris gave a small, weak smile and stepped forward. The room fell silent, and all eyes turned to him as he cleared his throat. "I have a short story to tell everyone," Harris began, his voice calm but firm. The guests quieted down and leaned in to listen. "My name is Harris Desmond, the eldest son of engineer Michael Desmond, the owner of Deschel Manufacturing Group of companies. As many of you may know, my father is ranked as the second wealthiest person on this continent. According to my family's tradition, I must marry within a set time frame before I am eligible to become the chairman of my father's companies. That deadline was fast approaching. I had only 6 months to find a wife. But I wasn't looking for just any woman. I wanted someone who would truly love me for who I am, not for my wealth or status." There was a pause as the audience absorbed his words. Rebecca and Angel exchanged shocked glances, while Clara's eyes wide with disbelief. "I knew this would be a challenge," Harris continued, "especially because the women I encountered in my social circles were often drawn to my wealth rather than the real me. So I asked my parents for permission to go far away, to live amongst people who didn't know my background, and to find a woman who would marry me for me, not for my money or family name, and they agreed." He smiled slightly, remembering his journey. "I decided to go to Rover City. I dressed in torn clothes and blended into the streets, offering to help young women with their luggage or errands, hoping to observe and understand the nature of the women I met. I often asked them to help me get any job that can keep my soul and body together. That was how I met Clara." Clara's face softened as she listened, the memories of their first meeting rushing back to her. Like many others, I offered to help Clara carry her bags from the market. She accepted my help and, when I begged her to get a job for me, she felt pity for me, and to my surprise, asked me to walk her to her house. Along the way, she explained how I could meet her stepmother, Rebecca, and advised me to present myself well in front of her, so as to get her attention, because she had no tolerance for low-life people. That same day, without hesitation, she gave me 2 pairs of jeans and 3 shirts that had belonged to her late father. She told me that, if I wanted her stepmother to give me a job, I would need to look a little better. Rebecca shifted uncomfortably in her seat, realizing that she had been oblivious to the kindness Clara had shown. Instead of rushing to meet her stepmother, Harris continued, I decided to take my time and get to know Clara better. I asked around the neighborhood and learned about her. People spoke highly of her character, her kindness, and her resilience despite the challenges she faced living with her stepmother. It didn't take long for me to realize that Clara was the one I wanted to marry, if she would agree. The audience was captivated as Harris spoke. He looked at Clara, his eyes full of affection. Clara went above and beyond for me. She made sure I had food to eat 6 different times, even when she didn't have much herself. She genuinely cared for my well-being. We became close friends over the course of 2 months, and eventually I asked her to marry me. Clara blushed slightly, remembering the moment. She told me, Harris said, his voice softening, that while she would love to marry me, she was certain her stepmother would never allow it. She was sure Rebecca would want her daughter, Mercy, to marry before her. Clara was so selfless that she was willing to sacrifice her happiness for her stepsister's sake. Rebecca's face hardened, but Harris continued. At that point, I decided it was time to meet Rebecca myself. But instead of revealing who I really was, I became her gardener. I wanted to observe the family dynamic and see how they truly treated Clara, and it didn't take long for me to confirm what I already knew. Clara was the right person for me. However, I wanted Mercy and her mother to reject me themselves, to show their true colors. That was when I came up with the idea of pretending to propose to Mercy. There were gasps from the audience, and Mercy's face turned bright red with anger. I wanted them to reject me willingly, Harris said, glancing at Mercy, and they did, as expected. But all along, my heart was set on Clara. She didn't know about my real status or my family's wealth, but she agreed to marry me and build a life with me, believing that I was just a simple man. Harris then turned to Mercy, who stood fuming beside him. You see, Mercy, I wanted a woman who loved me for who I am, not for my status or wealth. And that's why I chose Clara. She saw beyond appearances and treated me with kindness and respect, even when she thought I had nothing. The room was silent as Harris finished speaking. Rebecca sat frozen in disbelief, her plans shattered. Harris turned to Clara, his voice full of emotion. Clara, you are the love of my life. And now that the truth is out, I want you to know that I will spend the rest of my life making sure you are happy. The guests were still applauding when, suddenly, a woman from the crowd stood up and called out, Not so fast, Mercy. There's someone you must see before you leave this hall. Everyone turned in shock, wondering who she could be referring to. Before anyone could react, Mr. Jason got up from his seat, a broad smile on his face as he walked toward the stage. Congratulations, my daughter, he said warmly. Both Clara and Mercy gasped in unison, their voices trembling. Daddy, they exclaimed, their disbelief evident. Rebecca and her mother, Madame Angel, stared at each other, pure shock and confusion plastered on their faces. They had thought Jason was gone for good. Jason, standing tall and composed, stepped up to the stage and took the microphone from Harris. My name is Ronald Jason, the father of Clara, the bride. Contrary to what my wife Rebecca and her mother, Madame Angel, declared, I am not dead. The entire hall fell silent, the weight of his words hanging in the air. All eyes were on Jason, whose presence sent waves of astonishment through the room. I was, indeed, involved in a terrible accident years ago, he continued, his voice steady. My spinal cord was severely damaged, leaving me incapacitated. But instead of receiving the care and support one would expect from a family, my wife and her mother took me away from the hospital to a remote health center in a village. They bribed the matron in charge, ordering her to end my life and bury me in secret. They even threatened to kill her if she didn't comply. Gasps echoed through the hall as everyone absorbed the gravity of Jason's revelations. Clara's hands were shaking as she held on to Harris for support. Mercy stood frozen, her face drained of color, while Rebecca and Angel squirmed in their seats. Jason continued when the matron came to check on my unconscious body. After Rebecca and Madame Angel left, she recognized me. Two of her children were recipients of scholarships from the Jason Foundation, the charity I created to help struggling families. I had supported her family for over 15 years, and it was through my foundation that her children received an education after their father passed away. I also arranged for her to have a steady monthly income as a widow. On top of that, I personally secured her position at the health center where she worked. The same health center I was taken to. The crowd hung on his every word, stunned by the intricate web of betrayal and loyalty that had been spun. She vowed to save my life, Jason said, his voice thick with emotion. When I regained consciousness, she didn't immediately tell me what had happened, hoping to shield me from the harsh truth. But I insisted on seeing my family, and she was left with no choice but to reveal what Rebecca and Angel had planned. I was horrified, but determined to survive. I even witnessed the day Rebecca and her mother came to the hospital to collect my death certificate, so they could access my assets and financial accounts. Tears welled up in Clara's eyes as she absorbed the magnitude of what her father had endured. My greatest concern, Jason said, looking directly at Clara, was for my daughter. The matron, Mrs. Andrew, arranged for one of the chefs in our home to secretly inform me of Clara's well-being. That's how I managed to stay updated on my daughter's life, even though I was far away. There were murmurs of disbelief from the guests as they tried to piece together the story. Jason glanced at Harris and smiled when Harris came into Clara's life and eventually took her away from that toxic household. I was informed. Naturally, I wanted to know more about the man who had taken such an interest in my daughter. After conducting an underground investigation, I discovered Harris's true identity. Harris nodded at Jason in appreciation, their bond now clearly evident. I invited Harris to meet with me at my other house, a property I had purchased the same day I had the accident and which was still unknown to Rebecca. After speaking with him and seeing the love and respect he had for Clara, I gave him my blessing to marry her. Clara's heart swelled with emotion, finally understanding the full extent of her father's love and care for her. Jason turned toward the audience, his voice filled with gratitude. I wouldn't be standing here today if it weren't for Mrs. Andrew, the matron who gave me a second chance at life. Thanks to her, I am able to witness this incredible occasion, the marriage of my beloved daughter. The room erupted into applause. But the attention quickly shifted as Rebecca and Angel, realizing they were cornered, got up and made a dash for the exit. Before they could reach the door, two policemen appeared, blocking their way. Rebecca and Madame Angel, one of the officers said, "You were both under arrest for attempted murder and conspiracy." The crowd gasped, and all eyes followed the officers as they handcuffed the two women. Rebecca's face was a mixture of rage and panic, while Angel tried in vain to resist. As they were led out of the hall, Mercy broke down in tears, rushing toward her father. She fell to her knees, sobbing uncontrollably, and clung to his leg. "Daddy, I'm so sorry," she cried. "Please forgive me for everything. I never meant for any of this to happen." Jason looked down at her, his face etched with a mixture of sorrow and disappointment. Gently, but firmly, he pushed her away. "Mercy," he said, his voice cold, "I know everything you did to your sister. You were cruel, spiteful, and selfish. If Clara can find it in her heart to forgive you, then I will too. But until then, you will have to live with the consequences of your actions. As the wedding celebration continued, the atmosphere was filled with joy and laughter. Harris and Clara danced together, their smiles radiating pure happiness. The music played softly in the background, but all eyes were on the newlyweds, their connection undeniable as they moved in perfect harmony. Jason sat at his table, watching them with pride and deep satisfaction. His heart swelled with joy, knowing that his daughter was now in the care of a man who truly loved her. After all the years of pain and betrayal, witnessing this moment filled him with a sense of peace he hadn't felt in a long time. As the couple finished their final dance, the crowd erupted into applause. Harris took Clara's hand, and together they walked toward the waiting car, the start of their new life together. The car moved with an entourage of their detailed security. Jason waved at them as they left, his face beaming with excitement. It was a new chapter, not just for Clara, but for him as well. He had fought hard to reclaim his life and protect his daughter. And now, watching her embark on her own journey, he felt victorious. Standing a little distance away, Mercy watched the scene with tear-filled eyes. Her heart ached as she saw her sister, the girl she had once mistreated, driven away with a man who loved her deeply. As the car drove off into the sunset, Mercy stood frozen, her tears streaming down her face, wondering if she would ever find forgiveness, not only from her father and Clara, but also from herself.
Hello, besties. What's your take on this story? Please share your thoughts with us in the comments section below. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't yet. Make sure to check out the description for more exciting stories on this channel, such as Secret Exposed, Abandoned Twins, Headless Girl, Rich Mom, Poor Mom, Babies for Sale.
Thanks for watching. God bless you. I love you all.